Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into an ancient Greek forest, dappled light slipping through towering pine trees, cicadas buzzing lazily, and the occasional whisper of something not quite human. You trudge along a mossy path that feels older than time itself, feeling a quiet hush settle over everything. A hush, except for one very chatty voice drifting through the trees. That's Echo. She's not subtle. Not yet. In Greek myth, Echo was an Oread, a mountain nymph, part of that massive mythological HR department the gods used to staff nature. She was known for her beauty, yes, but more importantly, she talked. A lot. Like, full podcast with no guest energy. You meet her just as she's relishing her latest gossip session with a couple of dryads, maybe even one of those half-goat satyrs who always overstay their welcome. They're laughing. Echo's doing impressions. Birds scatter from the trees in annoyance, but here's the thing. Echo has a bit of a side hustle. She helps out Zeus. Yes, that Zeus, serial shapeshifter, professional philanderer, and CEO of Mount Olympus. Echo's job is simple: distract Hera whenever Zeus is off, shall we say, fraternizing with humanity. So while Zeus is turning into a swan or a cloud or whatever the flirt of the week requires, Echo keeps Hera chatting. Weather, sandals, temple decor, anything to keep the queen of the gods from sniffing out her husband's location. Spoiler, it doesn't work forever. Hera, known for her divine-level grudges and truly killer side-eye, eventually catches on. And she does not confront Zeus, because why bother with accountability when you can just curse a minor forest nymph instead? Echo sees Hera striding through the underbrush one afternoon, radiating suspicion like perfume. She tries to stall with cheerful small talk. "My queen. How radiant you look today. Have you done something new with your peacock feathers?" Hera's having none of it. She raises one sculpted eyebrow. "You've been covering for him, haven't you?" Echo freezes. That's her last free moment. Hera's punishment is weirdly specific. Not silence. That would have been too easy. No, Hera curses Echo to only be able to repeat the last words spoken to her. No original speech. No cleverness. No gossip. Just echoes. And just like that, the talkative girl of the forest becomes, well, a kind of living voice recorder. Now, historians still argue whether this myth reflects a deeper cultural fear of women's voices or just a love of dramatic irony. Either way, Echo is transformed in the worst possible way for someone who thrived on conversation. She can still hear and think, still feel everything, but all she can say is whatever someone else just said. Imagine trying to flirt, or order coffee, or yell at someone who stepped on your foot. Nope. All you've got is their last sentence, awkwardly tossed back like a parrot who also happens to be depressed. Ancient Greece, by the way, was absolutely riddled with transformation curses. Get on a god's bad side and boom, you're a spider, a tree, a weeping stone monument. Echo, somehow, gets a more psychological punishment. And maybe that's why her story hits different. So you walk with her now, through the drowsy haze of late afternoon, as she tries to adjust to her new state. A bird chirps. She chirps back, same note. A boy yells in the distance, and Echo's voice returns it like a fading boomerang. She doesn't cry. That would Echo too. Instead, she just keeps walking, hoping no one talks to her. Or maybe hoping someone does. You reach a ridge and gaze out over the sleeping hills. It's quiet, but not peaceful. Echo's mind spins like wind in a canyon. She wants to speak. To be heard as herself. Not just the last syllables of someone else's thoughts. Fun side note, the ancient Greeks really did believe echoes were caused by mountain spirits, Oreads like Echo herself. They didn't know about sound waves bouncing off surfaces, but they did know that something mysterious and unseen was answering them in the hills. That mystery became myth. The myth became metaphor. And you? You're standing right in the middle of it. And now, here's where things get a little awkward. See, while Echo's busy adjusting to her new vocal restrictions, there's someone else out there in the woods. Someone very different. He's not cursed. He's not humble. He's just pretty. Like, distractingly so. You've probably guessed who. But we'll get there soon enough. For now, you travel with Echo, step after soundless step, as she starts to drift away from the other nymphs. They don't know how to talk to her anymore. They say something, "Nice day." And she just repeats nice day. Back, but with this deep, aching sadness layered underneath. They stop trying. And that's the fringe tidbit of the night. In later Roman versions of the story, Echo's curse is tweaked. Some writers say she actually chose to hide after being rejected. They made her less of a cursed victim and more of a self-exiled romantic. But in the original Greek? Nah. This is a cosmic punishment, not a sad breakup playlist. Eventually, she stops trying to engage. She just wanders. Quiet, but not really quiet. Just echoing. You hear her before you see her now, a distant imitation of your own breath, or the soft repetition of birdsong from a branch overhead. She blends into the land. She becomes the forest's reply. And that's how she survives. Barely. So Echo becomes, quite literally, unheard. Her presence is felt only in fragments. Her story, like her voice, is passed along second-hand. Always someone else's words. Never her own, but soon she'll see him. And everything she's managed to hold together will begin to unravel in the most painfully beautiful, mythologically messy way possible. You wander deeper into the ancient woodland with Echo at your side. Well, just behind you really, her steps light and hesitant. If this were any other myth, she'd be whistling a tune or humming with the breeze. But now, she listens. To everything. Every crack of a twig, every flutter of wings, every echo of someone else's words bouncing between rocks and trees. That's all she has left. She doesn't sleep in one place anymore. Sometimes it's a mossy ledge, other times a hollow tree trunk or a crumbling shrine left to forgotten gods. Not that anyone really notices. Nymphs don't age quite like humans do. They just fade. Especially when cursed. Especially when lonely. Echo spends her days slipping between shadows, humming silently to herself out of habit. She's still her, somewhere in there. But with no way to express her thoughts, her feelings get trapped like butterflies in a glass jar, fluttering, beautiful, but going nowhere. Now and then she tries. Someone calls out, maybe a traveler searching for a lost donkey, or a shepherd yelling at the sky, and she repeats the last word. Donkey. She'll call, and the traveler looks around, puzzled. But they never find her. Her voice has become like the wind's trick. Familiar, and always too far away. Historians still argue whether the Greeks genuinely believed in physical nymphs like Echo wandering the world, or if these tales were always just poetic ways to explain the natural world. Either way, it doesn't change her fate. One afternoon, a small group of local children are playing along a rocky path. One yells, "I won." Echo replies, faint but clear, "I won." They freeze. One gasps, "Did you hear that?" Another shouts, "Say something else." They yell into the forest, and Echo replies, only ever their last words, tossed back like a game of verbal catch. It's funny for about 3 minutes. Then they get scared. Run home. Tell their parents the hills are haunted. Echo doesn't follow. She's heard it before. She begins to climb the rocky ridge near the riverbank, a spot nymphs usually avoid. Too exposed. Too open. But something draws her today. A shimmer in the air. Maybe it's just the heat playing tricks. Or maybe it's that low thrum of divine foreshadowing all good myths carry. She crouches near a ledge, peering through vines. And that's when she sees him. Not hears. Sees. He's leaning over the stream, sipping water from cupped hands. Dark curls tousled. Sunlight bouncing off his bare shoulders like a sculptor's dream. His reflection gazes back at him, and even that seems entranced. You can't help but blink. You've seen your share of ancient busts, those clean marble chins and high cheekbones in museum cases, but Narcissus makes them all look like draft versions. The real deal is right here, and unfortunately, he knows it. You stay hidden with Echo. Watching. This is the first time in, possibly ever, that she's interested in someone not for what they say, but for how they simply are. Narcissus isn't talking. He's humming. Tossing stones. Making the kind of small, unconscious gestures that speak louder than words. And Echo? She falls for each one. Problem is, when the moment comes, when she steps forward, breaking a twig beneath her foot, he hears it. Turns. Calls out, "Who's there?" You know what happens. Echo swallows hard. Her voice trembles with hope. She says, softly, "Who's there?" He frowns. Come out. Come out. she repeats, her voice growing just a touch more urgent, like a string being pulled tighter. Narcissus looks around, half amused, half suspicious. "Are you playing tricks on me?" "Tricks on me," Echo whispers, shrinking slightly behind a tree. This goes on. A maddening duet. A conversation that isn't one. You can feel Echo trying to bend the words, to infuse them with meaning, her meaning. But it's like trying to sculpt from fog. No matter how much she wants to speak for herself, Hera's curse holds fast. And Narcissus? He's amused. Briefly. Then annoyed. "Stop mocking me," he snaps. Echo repeats, voice cracking now, "Mocking me." He turns, scans the woods, and shrugs. "Weirdo." Then he leaves. Echo stays rooted in place, the rejection hitting harder than the curse itself. Because for a second, for just a moment, she imagined something different. That maybe, just maybe, she could have found a way to connect. To be heard. The leaves don't even rustle around her. Here's your mainstream history fact of the night. Narcissus is one of the few mythological figures with a legacy in actual psychology. Narcissism, coined thousands of years later, is named after him. The guy who loved only his own reflection. The guy who made being self-obsessed a literal cautionary tale. But in this moment, he's just another teenage boy with too much confidence and too little empathy. Echo doesn't cry. Her tears would make noise. Instead, she does what she always does now, she echoes. His words, his footsteps, his presence, all fading away, all being replayed in quiet fragments by a girl who never asked for any of this. And now, things start to shift. Slowly. Imperceptibly. Because you're not the only one watching this story unfold. There's someone else who's seen this rejection. Someone with divine reach and a taste for ironic justice. But we'll get to her. For now, Echo stumbles back into the shade, her heart pounding, not with joy or anticipation, but with the sour ache of being ignored. Again, you sit with her for a while. And that's okay. She doesn't need fixing. She just needs someone to hear her. The wind picks up. It says nothing. And still, Echo answers it. You follow a stream winding its way through the woodland, cool water slipping over smooth stones, the air thick with pine and the lazy sweetness of summer leaves. Echo's still somewhere nearby, quieter now, wrapped in her own silence. But ahead of you, stepping into the golden light like he owns it, comes the boy at the center of this mess. Narcissus. You've already met him, technically. But this time, you see him fully. Not from behind a bush or through someone else's eyes. Now it's just you and him, and wow, you get it. This guy is almost too symmetrical. His profile could slice marble. His curls probably smell like olives and hubris. He's got the kind of face that would make an ancient sculptor weep into his chisel. Narcissus walks like someone who's never had to try too hard. Not in conversation. Not in love. Not in life. He's the son of the river god Cephissus and a naiad named Laribe, which makes him basically a walking nature aesthetic. Blessed by the gods with unearthly beauty, doomed by personality to be, well, kind of a jerk. Even when he's alone, he looks like he's performing for an invisible audience. There's a kind of theatricality in the way he picks flowers, flicks dirt off his sandals, or studies his reflection in a puddle like it's giving him career advice. Now here's a historical fact that might surprise you. The Greeks weren't always impressed by beauty. Sure, they appreciated a good cheekbone, but character, moderation, sophrosyn, those were the true ideals. Narcissus, in contrast, is almost a satire of what happens when beauty becomes an identity. And worse, when you use it as a shield. In other myths, people worship the gods. They fear them. They make offerings. Narcissus, meanwhile, seems to think the gods are probably lucky to exist in his story. And they don't love that. He strolls into a clearing, totally unaware he's being watched by multiple entities right now. Echo, you, and, somewhere far above, deities who have had just about enough of his attitude. And to be fair, he has been rude. He's brushed off suitors with icy disdain, rolled his eyes at declarations of love, and once reportedly laughed in a poor shepherd's face just for daring to write him a poem. Not exactly the ideal prom date, but it's not just arrogance. It's something deeper. Narcissus doesn't understand love. Not really. He sees attention as flattery, desire as inconvenience. Real connection? That's someone else's problem. There's even a fringe version of the myth where the seer Tiresias warns Narcissus's mother, he will live a long life, if he never knows himself. What that means depends on who you ask. Some say it's about introspection. Others think it's about self-awareness being a trap. Either way, it's definitely the kind of fortune that comes back to haunt you after Act 2. Anyway, back to the boy in the woods. Narcissus kneels beside the stream, scooping water lazily into his hands. He's talking to himself. Not in a weird way, more like muttering compliments. Looking good today, he chuckles. Not a single zit and echo? She's there, pressed against a tree trunk, heart pounding. She wants to say something, anything, but all she can do is repeat. It's like having your vocal cords replaced with a boomerang. You can almost see the hope flicker in her eyes when he speaks. Maybe, if he says something tender enough, she can toss it back and make it sound like her own. Maybe this time, it'll feel like conversation. But Narcissus isn't here for meaningful exchanges. He stretches out, basking in the sunlight, occasionally glancing at the river's surface, admiring his own face without knowing it's his. And yes, before you ask, this is where things begin to unravel. Because Narcissus doesn't know that the gods are watching. And one in particular is growing more irritated with each flippant shrug, each cruel laugh, each eye roll directed at love itself. Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. A divine equalizer. She's not flashy like Athena, or petty like Hera. She's patient. Surgical. The kind of force you don't notice until your life is quietly, devastatingly off course. She's been keeping tabs. Echo's heartbreak? Noted. The shepherd's humiliation? Logged. Narcissus's general air of smug unbotheredness? Yeah, she's over it. Now, remember how myths always love to moralize? Narcissus isn't just a pretty boy being mean. He's the embodiment of what happens when beauty exists without humility. When you become so enchanted with yourself, there's no room for anyone else. And so, Nemesis plants a seed. Or, in this case, a reflection. As the sun dips lower, casting shadows like sleepy arms over the forest, Narcissus leans closer to the water's surface. He's thirsty, sure, but also curious. There's something off about the face staring back. It's perfect. Familiar. Mysterious. He blinks. So does it. He smiles. It does too. And just like that, Narcissus falls in love with his own reflection. Here's the kicker, he doesn't realize it is a reflection. He thinks it's a water spirit. A nymph. Someone. Something, so beautiful and pure they must be watching him. Wanting him. It doesn't occur to him that the feelings he's projecting are a mirror of his own. He whispers, "Who are you?" The reflection says nothing. Just smiles. He reaches out. The water ripples. The face vanishes. And in that moment, Narcissus panics. Because for the first time, he wants something he can't have. Not power. Not praise. But connection. And it slips through his fingers. Echo watches from the trees, horrified. She sees what he doesn't. And she knows, this, finally, is her equal. Two souls who cannot be heard. One cursed to repeat. One cursed to fall for a silence shaped like his own. You lie down now, the grass cool beneath your back, and let the scene play out. A boy and his mirror. A girl and her echo. And a goddess above, arms folded, watching it all unfold like slow burn justice. And maybe that's the most human part of all these ancient myths, the way we chase what we already are. Until we fall in love with something we can't reach. You settle near the stream's edge, watching from the shade as the most awkward love story in mythology continues to unfold. Well, awkward for Echo at least. Narcissus? He's blissfully unaware that anyone else exists. Or ever has, really. He's still staring into the water. Eyes wide, lips slightly parted, completely enchanted. The surface trembles when the breeze picks up, and his heart skips. "Don't go," he whispers. Echo hears it. Her fingers dig gently into the bark of a tree. "Don't go," she repeats. A plea, but also an echo. Always just an echo. She steps closer. She's been watching long enough to recognize this isn't just a fleeting glance. Narcissus is doing what no other suitor ever managed. He's holding still. Not chasing, not teasing. Just gazing. Fixed. Fragile. And oddly tender. She moves through the dappled light, her bare feet soft against the grass. You feel her hope rise again. Just a flicker, like a candle relit after wind. Because if he can love that face in the water, maybe she can find a way to fit between the ripples. To catch his attention, even for a moment. Narcissus sighs. I've never seen anyone so beautiful. Echo's heart stumbles. So beautiful, she whispers. He blinks, confused. Who's there? He says again, who's there? He turns. And for a moment, their eyes meet. Echo steps into full view, arms open just slightly, offering nothing more than herself. Her face is soft with yearning, but also bracing for the blow she knows is coming. She's been here before. Not with him, but with hope. Hope has always been the dangerous part. And, oh, he delivers. Not you again, Narcissus says. It's half disbelief, half boredom, like someone being handed a salad when they ordered cake. Again, Echo says. Not proud. Not angry. Just echoing, because that's all she's allowed. Narcissus folds his arms. You're mocking me. Mocking me, she repeats. The words land heavy, like stones slipping into water. He shakes his head. Leave me alone. Alone. She doesn't run. Not right away. She lingers. You can feel her trying, just trying, to will him into seeing her. Not as a reflection. Not as an echo. As someone. Anyone. But that moment never arrives. Eventually, she fades into the trees again, her footfalls as light as mist. She doesn't cry, because even grief echoes. She simply retreats, more transparent than she was before. And yes, that's part of her curse too, not just her voice, but her whole self fading with each rejection, like a song you can't quite remember the words to anymore. You follow her this time. Away from the pool. Away from Narcissus, who is already back to murmuring sweet nothings into his watery mirror. And here's where myth turns poetic in the worst way, because Narcissus wasn't meant to find happiness. That wasn't part of the divine lesson plan. His punishment isn't just obsession, it's unrequited obsession. A forever wanting. A need that cannot be touched. Like reaching through glass. The gods designed it that way. Nemesis in particular. She didn't choose fire or lightning bolts. She chose longing. The softest, slowest torment. Historians still debate how much of this myth was morality tale and how much was pure dramatic flourish. Was Narcissus just a cautionary prototype for narcissism, or was he a metaphor for how desire twists inward when we fear real vulnerability? Some versions say he does realize it's his own face, but chooses to stay anyway. Others claim he dies never knowing. Either way, he's trapped. Now for your fringe tidbit of the evening. Some obscure fragments of the myth claim Echo tried to embrace Narcissus before this final rejection. That she physically ran to him, flung her arms around him, and he pushed her away. Hard. That version was deemed too much by most poets, but it's still out there, lingering in the background, like her voice. Back by the stream, Narcissus shifts positions. He lies down beside the water, propping his head on one arm. The image in the water mirrors him perfectly. He smiles. The image smiles back. He speaks again. I love you. And Echo, hidden now behind a nearby oak, hears it. I love you. She says it softly, carefully. And for the first time, the words are her own and his. For just a breath, they seem to belong to both, but he doesn't hear her. He only hears himself. She tries once more to step forward, but this time, her legs won't move. Not out of fear. Out of loss. Like gravity just stopped applying to her the way it used to. You sit beside her now. You're not sure she notices. But maybe that's the point. She's become part of the land. Part of the myth. And you're the one still moving, still watching. In the water, Narcissus kisses his own reflection. You can't help but whisper, wow. And faintly, from deep in the woods, wow. That's Echo. Still trying. Even now, you stay close to the tree line as the sun begins to fall behind the hills, bleeding amber into the sky like some forgotten god was lazy with their paintbrush. Narcissus hasn't moved from his post by the water. And Echo? She's no longer standing. She's curled near the roots of a knotted pine, limbs slack, eyes open but unseeing, the way someone looks after losing not just a moment, but the chance of a moment. You'd think rejection would be easier to take after you've been cursed by a queen of the heavens. But nope. This one still stings. And while Echo quietly recedes, her voice still echoing faintly from the crevices around you, soft repetitions, fragments of Narcissus's self-love. You begin to feel a strange stillness in the forest. Like the trees are waiting for something. Like the gods are holding their breath, because now that Narcissus has rejected Echo, his fate is sealed. The gods didn't curse him because he ignored her. They cursed him so he would. That's the difference. He was always meant to look into that pool, see beauty, and lose himself. Echo's heartbreak? Just the prelude. A sad, fading overture to his upcoming solo performance. Still, it's painful to watch. Even if you're not particularly rooting for the guy. Now, across Olympus, the divine peanut gallery begins to stir. Apollo probably smirks. Aphrodite raises one bored eyebrow. Artemis may be polishing a bow somewhere, not bothering to tune in. But Nemesis? She watches closely. Every sign Narcissus makes, every yearning glance, every trembling moment he leans closer to the water and whispers, "Stay with me," that's her orchestration. By now, he's fully obsessed. Not just admiring. Enraptured. He doesn't eat. Doesn't sleep. Just gazes. You sit a few feet away now, unseen, watching the weirdest love story ever told. Enter Act 2. "My beloved," he murmurs to his own reflection. "Why do you vanish when I reach for you?" Echo, from deep in the woods, offers a soft, aching return. "Reach for you." He thinks it's the water spirit speaking. He doesn't realize it's Echo, still trying to be a part of the story. And here's your mainstream fact for this section. This whole myth appears in Ovid's Metamorphoses, the Roman poet's sprawling collection of transformation stories. Ovid didn't just collect myths, he reshaped them with poetry and pathos. He took Greek characters and made them bleed just a little more. Echo and Narcissus became his tragedy, refined and sharpened, and told with enough emotional devastation to make modern screenwriters jealous. But even Ovid couldn't make Narcissus sympathetic for long. You watch as he cups the water again. But doesn't drink. The need to admire, to possess, to hold what he sees. It overpowers every basic instinct. He's starving, lips dry, eyes wide. But all he wants is the one thing he can have. Not love. Not a person. His own image. And that's what makes it so tragically human. Because haven't we all, in some way, been caught in the loop of our own ideals? The version of ourselves we imagine, or the fantasy we construct, and then fall in love with? The problem with Narcissus isn't just vanity. It's confusion. He doesn't know what he's loving. He just knows he's helpless to stop. Now here's a fringe tidbit. In one obscure version of the myth, the reflection does speak. But only to mock him. To say, essentially, "You love me, but I am not real. I am what you want to see." That version didn't make the canonical cut, too philosophical for the masses, but it sticks in your mind now as you watch him inch ever closer to the water. His hands tremble, his lips brush the surface, and the reflection disappears. Ripples scatter it into nothingness. Narcissus gasps. You'd think he'd finally realize what's happening, right? Nope. He thinks the spirit is angry. That it fled because he tried to touch it. He doesn't understand it's a mirror. Not a muse. He whispers, "Come back." And from far behind you, "Come back." Echo again. Still echoing. Still there. This is the tragedy that myths do best, not just the fall, but the slow recognition that there is no salvation. That the thing you chase doesn't love you back. Can't. Won't. And still, you can't let go. Narcissus curls up on the riverbank, chin resting on his knees now, still angled toward the water. You imagine that if he ever did blink long enough to look away, he'd feel like something inside him was dying. Because his love, broken and one-sided, is all he has left. And speaking of fading things, Echo's beginning to unravel. Literally. Not with drama or noise. Just less presence. Less weight. Like she's made of fog and someone left the door open. Her limbs feel like mist. Her skin feels like memory. And her voice? It grows lighter with each echo she returns. One more repetition, and she feels herself shrink just a little further. You wonder if she knows what's happening. If she wants it to happen. If fading is a kind of relief when your whole life is reduced to someone else's script. The forest darkens. Narcissus murmurs again. "Please, come back." Echo's voice carries one last time, "Come back." And you feel it, like something inside you is falling. Not fast. Just Slowly, beautifully, sadly falling into silence. You wake, or maybe you never really slept, still at the edge of the stream. The light is thinner now, cool and silver, the kind that wraps the forest in velvet quiet. The only sound is water. Flowing, reflecting, endlessly repeating, like the voice of someone who once tried to say more but was only allowed to echo. Narcissus is still there. He hasn't moved. His cheek now rests against the grass, damp with evening dew. His eyes remain locked on the water's surface. He's speaking, barely above a whisper, as though worried the reflection will vanish again if he breathes too loudly. "You're all I want," he murmurs. "You're all I want." Echo's reply drifts faintly through the trees, softer than ever now. You can't even tell which direction it came from. Her voice is unraveling, but someone else is arriving now. Not in footsteps. Not in sound. In presence. Nemesis. You feel her before you see her, if you see her at all. A change in air pressure, a tension that hums just beneath the silence. The goddess of balance doesn't wear drama. She doesn't need lightning bolts or monster sidekicks. She is justice shaped like inevitability. Cold, impartial, ancient as the stars. She doesn't speak to you. Or to Narcissus. She doesn't have to. Her work is already complete. But this is the moment she's been waiting for, because justice, in myth, isn't about punishment. It's about symmetry. And Narcissus's life has been anything but symmetrical. Adored without gratitude. Desired without humility. Dismissive of others' feelings with a smirk and a shrug. So now, he feels what they felt. Now, he loves something that cannot return his affection. It's not that Nemesis hates him. She doesn't hate. She balances. And she has been watching. Here's your historical fact for this chapter: Nemesis was more than just a revenge goddess. In classical Greek culture, she was deeply tied to eidos, the concept of righteous shame or humility before the gods. People prayed to her not for vengeance, but for moderation, so their blessings wouldn't turn to curses through hubris. Her temples weren't filled with the angry or vengeful. They were filled with the cautious. And Narcissus? Let's just say he never sent her a thank you note. As he lies there, half-starved and entranced, a new thought enters his mind. You can see it shift across his face, barely perceptible at first, like a cloud nudging sunlight. He begins to suspect something is off. "What are you?" he whispers to the reflection. No answer. Not even echo this time. She's too faint. He leans closer again, hand trembling above the surface. "Why do you not speak?" Still no response. He begins to frown. To ache. That's the only word for it. Ache. Not in his body, but in the space where understanding should be. For the first time, he realizes what he's looking at isn't something separate. Isn't someone else. It's just himself. And the world tilts. This is the moment Tiresias's old prophecy comes full circle. He will live a long life, if he never knows himself. But now he does. And it shatters him. You expect him to scream, maybe. To run. To tear at his clothes or curse the gods. But he doesn't. He just stares. With this quiet devastation, like someone finding out the person they've been falling for was never real. That the romance was a mirror. That they were always alone. There's a fringe version of this myth where Narcissus laughs here, laughs bitterly, realizing how blind he's been, and accepts his fate like a man walking into a storm. But in most tellings, he simply folds in on himself. His body weakens. His thoughts quiet. His world shrinks to that single, unchanging image in the stream. And he doesn't leave. He can't. Because leaving would mean forgetting that face. And that would be worse than death. From far off, Echo watches. Or what's left of her does. She barely has form now. You can feel her presence more than you can see it. She's part wind, part silence, part sorrow. She could leave. Slip into the mountains, find a new patch of forest to haunt. But she stays. Not out of obsession. Out of solidarity. Because she knows what it is to want and not be heard. And now, so does he. Narcissus is whispering again. But it's different now. Not romantic. Regretful. "I deserve this," he says. The wind doesn't answer. Not even echo. And here's your scholarly debate of the hour. Some say Nemesis's curse was meant to humble him, but not to destroy him. That if he'd walked away at that moment of realization, the gods might have forgiven. That redemption was still possible. But he didn't. He couldn't. Maybe that's the tragedy. Not the obsession. The inability to change. You sit with him through the night. The stars come out one by one, reflected in the surface of the pool. Narcissus's eyes grow glassy, like he's becoming part of the reflection himself. And somewhere, deep in the hush of the trees, Echo repeats one final word: deserve. It lingers. And then, silence. Morning creeps in slowly. A soft gray fog hangs low over the riverbank, clinging to the reeds and floating in loose strands across the surface of the water. Birds start their songs hesitantly, as if unsure whether this forest is awake or still in mourning. Narcissus is still lying there. He hasn't moved. His skin is pale now, not the fair kind that inspires poetry, but the color of stone soaked by shadow. His once shining eyes are dull, unfocused, and half closed. Still pointed toward the water. You step closer. He's murmuring again, but this time, it's not praise or longing or even confusion. It's apology. I see now, he says. From somewhere distant, perhaps too distant, comes the faintest echo. See now, it's Echo. What remains of her? Less than shadow, less than mist. But she's still trying. Still responding. Even now, because here's the twist no one sees coming, this part of the story isn't about punishment anymore. It's about understanding. For the first time in his life, Narcissus doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks to be known. Not by others. By himself. The boy who never asked who he really was now lies dying, whispering things not to the reflection, but to the space between. I was cruel, he says. I thought beauty made me special. But I never asked anyone what they saw. Silence. Then, faintly, they saw. You don't know if Echo's voice is an answer or just a memory, but he hears it. And he closes his eyes. Here's the mainstream fact for this section. The myth of Narcissus doesn't just end with death. It ends with transformation. Like so many tales and metamorphoses, death isn't the full stop, it's a pivot. A reshaping of sorrow into symbol. A poetic upgrade. So when Narcissus finally breathes his last, the gods, moved by pity or perhaps satisfied by the symmetry, intervene. His body fades. In its place, a small flower grows. Slender stem. White petals. A bright yellow center that always bends down toward its reflection in the water. A narcissus. Yes, the flower is named after him. The myth gave it meaning. And even today, when you spot one near a stream or lake, you're seeing a symbol of self-love, beauty, and the danger of confusing admiration with connection. A French version of the myth says that the flower didn't just appear where he died, it is him. His soul, trapped in a loop of longing, bending forever toward its own image, never quite touching. Always close. Always unreachable. And Echo? She lingers. Not beside the flower. Not even in the same clearing, but everywhere. Because Echo's curse doesn't end with his death. She doesn't get closure. There's no neat resolution. Her body fades completely, and what's left is voice. Disconnected. Disembodied. But still echoing. You call out, just for the sake of it. Hello? And from the cliffs above, from the hills around you, comes the reply, hello. It's her. Still waiting to be part of something. Still hoping someone will say the right words. Something worth repeating. Something worth meaning. Here's something odd. Some ancient Greeks believed that Echo's spirit moved into caves, grottos, and empty amphitheaters. Places where sound returns. And over time, the myth became less about her heartbreak and more about her function. She became a natural law. A phenomenon. A memory of a girl who once loved a boy who loved himself too much. But you know better. You know she was real, in the way myths can be real. Which is to say, emotionally true, if not biologically provable. You felt her hope. You heard her fading. And now, you carry her voice with you, just by listening. Narcissus, meanwhile, is a flower now. Not metaphorically. Literally. His legacy lives on every time someone plants spring bulbs and forgets to water them until April. That gentle curve of the head? That's him. Forever gazing at his own reflection, even if it's just in the garden hose puddle. Scholars still argue whether Narcissus's end was just deserts or gentle tragedy. Some say he got what was coming. Others say he was a victim of the gods' cruelty, cursed before he ever had a chance to grow into something better. And a few ask the real question, what if Echo had never been cursed? What if she had spoken freely? Would he have heard her? Would he have listened? No one knows. But the story ends the same way. A flower by the water, a voice in the wind, and you, walking away slowly, not wanting to disturb either one. The sun climbs higher now. The fog burns off. The stream keeps running. And still, somewhere, somehow, Echo waits. You leave the clearing slowly, each step away from the stream feeling oddly delicate. Like you're walking away from someone asleep and you don't want to wake them. Behind you, the Narcissus flower remains bowed gently toward the water, its reflection now the only companion it will ever truly hold. But this isn't the end. Not for Echo, because myths don't wrap up neatly. They ripple outward. And Echo, now more rippled than person, has just begun her strange afterlife. You walk beneath ancient pine trees, their tall columns like the ribs of some old forgotten cathedral. The forest seems emptier without her. Not in the way a room is empty, but in the way a song feels unfinished when the last note never comes. You call out, just once, just to feel her echo, and you get it. Faint, ghostly. Your voice returned to you like a memory you weren't ready for. Echo. That's her. Not pretending to be herself. Not even trying anymore. Just being what she has become, a mirror of sound. Here's your mainstream fact. The Greeks believed echo was a personification of sound reflection. They didn't separate science from myth, they explained the physics through personality. To them, echo was the sound bouncing off stone. Not because it was poetic, though it is, but because it made emotional sense. A voice doomed to repeat others' words? That had to be a nymph punished by a jealous goddess. And speaking of jealous goddesses, remember Hera? You almost forgot about her. Didn't you? She hasn't. She's still somewhere in the divine backdrop, watching Echo's fate play out far beyond her original curse. Maybe with satisfaction. Maybe with guilt. Who knows? Gods in these stories don't often change their minds. But mortals, or half-mortals like nymphs, they evolve. They suffer. They shift from character to metaphor and back again. Echo is everywhere now. In canyons. In deep valleys. In marble halls. Every time a child yells, "Hey!" and hears "Hey!" right back, it's her. The girl who once wanted to be heard. Now permanently part of the world's reply. But here's the fringe detail. In a few forgotten scraps of myth, there's a postscript. An after story. It says that Pan, the god of wild places, flutes, and uncivilized desire, heard Echo's voice drifting through a cave and fell in love. Not with Echo herself, because she no longer had a body, but with her sound. Her presence. He played his pipes to her, not expecting a reply. Just offering something into the silence. And sometimes, she would echo the last note back. A strange duet between god and ghost. Some stories even say Pan gathered the faintest pieces of her voice and wove them into his music. That every tune he played after that carried her fragments, like bits of ash blown into a melody. A haunting. A collaboration. Is it romantic? A little. But mostly, it's soft. Strange. Gentle in the way myths rarely are. Two beings neither fully present nor fully lost, trying to meet somewhere between a note and its echo. You keep walking now, tracing a barely there trail over hills carpeted with moss. The air smells of time and old stories. You pause to rest near a cave, one of those yawning cliff mouths that feels older than language itself. You whisper something, anything. Are you still there? There's a pause. Then, still there. You nod. It's enough. The world has turned Echo into something permanent, in the way only loss sometimes can. And Narcissus? He's forgotten, mostly. Just a flower in a field. A word psychologists use to diagnose the deeply self-absorbed. A cautionary tale for anyone who loves their own reflection more than they love other people. But Echo? You carry her with you every time you speak into a canyon, every time your voice comes back a little lonelier. Here's your scholarly debate. By the way, some ancient thinkers believed Echo's transformation was the more profound one. Not just because she faded, but because she adapted. She changed form. She became part of the world, not just in story, but in sound. While Narcissus stayed still, rooted by his obsession, Echo moved. Everywhere. She became eternal. And now, so does her story. You sit by the cave for a while longer, letting the silence press gently against your shoulders. The wind picks up, brushing your face like a hand made of memory. You say nothing. And still, The world feels full of echoes of what could have been said, of what was never heard, of what still tries to answer. Even now, you're on the move again, weaving through the undergrowth as the forest stretches and sighs into late morning. The breeze carries the scent of wet bark and distant laurel blossoms. You keep thinking you'll reach the edge of the story, like there must be a sign saying the end, return to real life, but instead the path keeps pulling you deeper, because the thing about myths? They don't really end. They echo. And you're still caught in one. Somewhere behind you, Echo's voice is still tied to the wind. Somewhere back by the stream, Narcissus remains a flower, frozen in eternal self-recognition. But ahead of you is the world after them, and you can already tell it remembers. You pass a shepherd resting on a hillside. He's carving something into wood. Not a face. Not a name. Just a pattern. Repeating loops. Curves echoing curves. He glances up at you, nods. You nod back. No one speaks, because sometimes silence is the story. Here's your mainstream fact: in ancient Greece, myths weren't just bedtime tales. They were explanations of thunder, of sunrises, of grief. People told stories not because they were false, but because they felt true. And Echo and Narcissus? They became part of that explanation system. Why voices return in mountains. Why flowers lean toward water. Why beauty alone isn't a virtue. But now you're entering the realm of aftermath. And aftermath is rarely tidy. In the towns beyond the woods, people start whispering about what happened near the riverbank. Some say a boy vanished. Others say a spirit lives there now, luring travelers with its perfect face. A few mutter that if you listen at the right moment, just before dusk, you'll hear two voices at once, one asking for love, the other returning the same words, too late to mean anything. You sit in a small grove just off the path. Someone's left offerings there. Not big ones. Not showy. A cup of honey. A bundle of mint. A smooth river stone etched with the symbol for eternity. Probably a poet's shrine. Or a very confused teenage crush. Either way, you feel it, the story lives on. Here's a fringe tidbit: in later Roman poetry, Narcissus's image became something more sinister. Not just self-obsession, but a kind of decay. Poets used his name to describe cities that admired their own power too much. Kings who demanded statues of themselves in every temple. Even lovers who ghosted their partners to chase a fantasy version of themselves. Narcissus became a warning, and Echo, his soundtrack. And that warning, still relevant. Scroll through any feed, and you'll find 1,000 Narcissuses. Narcissi? Let's go with Narcissuses. Less botanical, more poetic. Filtered faces. Curated smiles. Carefully constructed reflections of lives too polished to be real. And in the comments, a sea of echoes, repeating praise. Heart emojis. Echoing each other's words. None of it truly heard. But you're not here to critique the algorithm. You're here to feel what the myth left behind. And it left something hollow. Something lovely, but sad. Because even in the stories that linger, there are no happy endings. Just transformations. You wander down into a valley where the trees give way to wide sky. A narrow lake sits in the middle like a silver mirror. You approach the shore and kneel beside it. The reflection staring back isn't Narcissus. It's you. Tired. A little dusty. But real. You stare for a moment, unsure what you're even looking for. And just when you're about to look away, something strange happens. You speak. Why are we drawn to our own image? And the wind answers, own image. Echo. Still watching. Still listening. Not judging. Not mocking. Just there. Maybe you don't need the gods to answer your questions. Maybe the echo is the answer. Not the original voice, but the response. Not the thing you love, but how it returns your love. You sit with that idea for a while. That maybe love isn't about perfection. Maybe it's about what's left after perfection breaks. The voice that stays. The shadow that lingers. The echo. And suddenly, you're not so sad anymore. Because Echo didn't vanish. She became part of everything. And Narcissus didn't win. He just transformed. You rise. The water ripples. The face blurs. But the lesson remains. Speak kindly. Listen harder. And don't fall for your own reflection when there are so many voices worth hearing. You walk onward now, deeper into the folds of time where myth blends with memory, and memory thins into air. The trees part. The sky stretches wide and pale, like parchment waiting to be written on. And somewhere far behind you, the story of Echo and Narcissus fades, but it doesn't end. It simply dissolves into the landscape, as myths do. You reach a hilltop overlooking the valley, and for the first time, you see just how many rivers carve through the land. Not just one stream where Narcissus met his reflection, but dozens. Hundreds. Crisscrossing through space and legend, each holding a shard of a story. Each one reflecting someone who once looked down and asked, "Who are you?" You realize now, Echo and Narcissus weren't a beginning or an ending. They were a pattern. A loop. And you're still in it. Here's your mainstream historical moment for today. The Greeks didn't tell these stories for amusement alone. They used them to explore psychological truths long before psychology existed. Narcissus? The Greeks knew he wasn't just a character. He was a type. Echo? She wasn't just a cursed girl. She was what happened when voice lost agency. And here's the twist. We still live by these patterns. How many times have you longed for someone who couldn't hear you? How often have you looked into something, someone, trying to find yourself? You sit on the hilltop and let your thoughts unwind like yarn from a dropped spindle. Slowly. Loosely. Letting them fall. Below you, the forest stretches. And there, nestled among the pines, is a single, white bloom. A narcissus flower. Still bent. Still watching. The irony isn't lost on you. You wonder, did the gods pity him in the end? Was turning him into a flower an act of cruelty? Or mercy? Some versions of the myth argue it was kindness. That the gods, despite everything, gave him beauty without thought. A peaceful kind of stillness. A form that didn't hunger. That didn't need. Others insist it was punishment refined to perfection. A lifelong mirror, locked in place. Beauty stripped of meaning. You're not sure, but you can't help noticing something. The flower doesn't seem miserable, just quiet, soft, present. And maybe, just maybe, that's all he ever really wanted, to hold still, to stop performing, to stop being the thing everyone else projected onto him. And the only way to do that was to become something that didn't speak, or move, or want. A kind of freedom. Now here's a fringe twist you haven't heard yet. In one obscure version found in a half-preserved papyrus scroll, there's a line scrawled at the bottom that says, "He finally loved without fear." No context. No explanation. Just that. And it sticks with you. Because maybe that's the lesson. Maybe we're all just trying to figure out how to love without fear. Fear of rejection, of misunderstanding, of being too much or not enough. Narcissus couldn't. Echo tried. Neither succeeded. But the story's not just about them anymore. It's about you. You stand again, brushing the grass from your knees. The wind lifts gently, rustling through olive branches and pine needles. In the distance, you hear a child laughing, then repeating themselves. Did you hear that? They call. And far off, from the cliffs, hear that? You smile. You know the voice. You descend the hill and find a stream again. Not the same one, but it doesn't matter. They're all echoes of each other now. You kneel and look into the water. Your reflection meets you. No divine glow. No haunting beauty. Just you. And for the first time, that feels like enough. You don't speak. And so, Echo doesn't answer, but you know she's there. Waiting. Always. And in that space between silence and sound, you feel something like peace. You stand up and leave the water behind, not because it's time to forget, but because it's time to carry the story with you, rather than live trapped inside it. Somewhere behind you, the flower nods slightly in the breeze. Not in mourning, in understanding. Your steps take you along the edge of the water now, where reeds sway like whispered thoughts and dragonflies dart across the surface, glimmering like tiny myths of their own. You've left behind the place where Echo and Narcissus met, fell apart, and became something else, but somehow, they follow you. Not as ghosts, as feelings. A certain quiet ache that clings to your ribs. That distant sensation of wanting to be known, fully, by someone who isn't looking in a mirror. You pass a circle of standing stones next. Not grand enough to be temples, not accidental enough to be random. Just there. The kind of place someone might come to speak aloud, even if no one answers. The kind of place Echo might like. You speak again, almost without realizing it. Do you remember me? And far off, remember me. You smile, just a little. It's not a reply, but it's something. Here's your mainstream history moment. In ancient rituals, especially rural ones, Greeks would often invoke Echo as a nymph of repetition. She was honored not with feasts or statues, but with sound. People would shout toward mountainsides just to hear her respond. They believed it brought luck. Connection. A way of making the invisible visible. She wasn't worshipped like Athena or Artemis, but she was remembered. Always heard, never seen, and somehow, that made her feel closer. Like she could be anywhere. You sit down on a rock warmed by the sun. You're not in a rush anymore. The journey now isn't forward, it's inward. Because whether you realize it or not, Echo's story is starting to feel like yours. How often have you wanted to say something real, only to find your words bouncing back at you, misunderstood or distorted? How many times have you longed to be seen? Not just looked at, but seen. Echo gets that. You hear her again. Faintly, seen. This myth, like so many, was never meant to comfort. It was meant to explain why we hurt, why we reach, why we listen for voices in the wind. And Narcissus? His story wasn't just about arrogance. It was about being caught in your own expectations. Falling in love with an idea of yourself, while the world tries to tap on the glass and say, "Hey, come out." There are people here, but he couldn't or wouldn't. And in doing so, he lost the only chance he had at connection, imperfect, maybe, but real. Here's your fringe tidbit. There's a version of the myth whispered by some later poets that suggests Narcissus did hear Echo's final words. Not clearly. Not with understanding. But something stirred in him just before he faded, a question. A half-formed realization that maybe the voice repeating his words wasn't mocking him. Maybe it was reaching out. That version ends with his final whisper, "Forgive me." And Echo, now nothing more than sound itself, saying, "Forgive me." You sit with that for a while. Because forgiveness, in myths, is rare. But when it happens, it leaves a mark. The sun dips slower, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the grass. You stand, continuing your quiet path through this myth-drenched landscape. The air has that late afternoon softness now, warm enough to linger, cool enough to slow your thoughts. You pass a traveler on the path. They nod. You nod. No words exchanged. But part of you wonders, did they hear the echo, too? Are we all just walking through stories, trying to find the one voice that matches ours? You round a bend and see a small shrine made of smooth river stones. No statues. Just a bowl of clear water, a mirror resting beside it. Someone has written a name beneath it in the dust. You kneel and look into the water. Again, your reflection stares back. But this time, you don't flinch. You don't ask questions. You don't search for answers. You just meet your own eyes and whisper, "I see you." Nothing echoes back. Not even echo. Because some truths are too full to bounce. And maybe that's the point. Evening slides in like a long, slow exhale. The sun lowers itself behind the olive-studded hills, casting everything in soft copper light. Shadows grow wide, spilling across the path in gentle waves. You walk slower now. Not because you're tired, but because everything feels too delicate to disturb. Somewhere behind you, Echo is still listening. She always is. But for now, she's quiet. You descend into a narrow gorge, where the stone walls rise on either side like the folds of a closed book. Every step you take sends a faint sound ahead of you, footsteps tapping on rock, breath catching in the hush. The acoustics are perfect here. And you can feel her in the walls. Not haunting. Not hovering. Holding. You call out softly, not a word this time. Just a gentle half curious, half lazy. And sure enough, it returns to you, slightly warped but unmistakably yours. Like an old friend repeating your inside joke just to remind you they're there. This is Echo's home now. Not in a single place, but in the act of being heard. Every echo is her, repeating, yes, but also witnessing. She doesn't create the sound, but she refuses to let it die alone. And here's your mainstream historical note. In ancient theaters, especially the amphitheaters of Greece and Rome, acoustics were everything. Architects actually studied and shaped the way voices echoed. A single actor on stage could speak a line, and a whole audience would hear it clearly. Why? Because echo wasn't just a myth. She was a principle of design. Revered. Harnessed. Built into stone. Echo isn't gone. She's infrastructure. You sit down on a flat rock and listen to the world breathe. Inhale, wind through grass. Exhale, a bird's wings catching air. You don't speak again. But she stays. in case you do. And somewhere beneath the stillness, another voice nudges its way into your thoughts. Narcissus. Not because he's returned. He hasn't. But because you're starting to understand him differently now. Earlier, you judged him, just a pretty boy with a mirror problem. But the longer you sit with his story, the more human he becomes. A kid praised too much, warned too little. Trapped between the world's admiration and his own confusion. Can you really blame someone for falling in love with the only thing that never left them? Here's your fringe version of events. Some whispered accounts suggest that Narcissus wasn't cursed at all. That his obsession wasn't divine punishment, but human loneliness. That he simply saw something beautiful and mistook it for love, because no one ever taught him the difference. That one hits harder, doesn't it? You lean back, palms against the stone. The night air is cooler now, threading through your fingers. You glance up. The first stars appear, tiny silver pins stuck in velvet. And for the first time all day, you notice the sky doesn't echo. It absorbs. It holds. It keeps every whisper like a secret. You wonder if Echo wishes she could do that. To just hold something and not let it go. But she can. That's not her shape anymore. And so, she repeats. And still, that repetition matters, because every time she answers, it means someone spoke. Someone reached out. Someone tried. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the boy who loved himself. Not the girl who faded. But the space between them, where communication failed, where silence became sacred, where sound wanted to connect but didn't know how. You're not here to fix it. You're here to remember it. To carry it with you like a song that never quite resolves. You rise from the rock and walk back toward the edge of the gorge. The path widens. The air smells of sage and warm dust. You take one last glance behind you, not for ghosts, but for echoes. And from the deep, stony walls behind you comes one last offering. A single word. Your name. Soft. Delayed. Familiar. Spoken by no one, returned by a girl who was once more than voice. You crest a final hill just as twilight settles into its deepest shade of blue. The horizon is stitched with the faintest thread of orange, like the last ember of a fire you didn't know you were sitting beside. And before you stretches a vast plain, gentle and open. Wildflowers sway in soft unison. The breeze feels like a lullaby that doesn't need lyrics. You feel like you've walked through not just a story, but a spell. Echo's voice lingers behind you, folded into the canyons and trees and chambers of your own chest. You don't hear her now, not exactly. But she's with you. Present in the spaces between silence and speech. A companion who needs no introduction, because she's already repeating your best and worst moments inside your memory. You wonder, if she had been born in another myth, would she have been a muse? The 10th muse, patron of repetition, of second chances, of phrases worth saying again. You smile at the thought, because Echo, more than anyone else in this story, understands the value of a second chance. You step into the field, tall grass brushing your calves, whispering its own version of poetry. The sky above you deepens further. The first real stars blink into place, shy at first, then confident, then countless. And with them comes a question you hadn't considered until now. What would have happened if Narcissus had heard her? Really heard her? If, just once, he had looked away from his reflection, turned toward the voice in the woods, and said, "Who's there?" Would the story have changed? Would she have emerged from the trees, uncertain but hopeful? Would he have smiled? Would they have become real to each other? Here's your scholarly debate of the evening. There's ongoing discussion among mythologists about whether this tale was always meant to be tragic, or if it once had a happier ending that was lost. Some believe the original version ended with Echo regaining her voice after his death, free at last to say something new. Others argue the ending was always a warning: speak before it's too late. Listen while you can. Don't assume there's always a reply. You sit beneath an olive tree near the edge of the plain. Its roots are twisted and ancient, like it's been waiting here just for you. You rest your back against the trunk and close your eyes. Not to sleep, to feel, to listen. And you do hear something, after a moment. Not a word, not even an echo. Just a shift in the air. Like presence. Like someone else breathing beside you who doesn't need to speak to be understood. You open your eyes again, slowly, and trace the arc of a falling star across the sky. You whisper, just once, "I hope you found peace." No response, but you know she heard. You remember the ancient idea that Echo didn't fade from existence, she became part of it. That every word we say joins her, And every word we repeat invites her back. And maybe, just maybe, when we whisper truths in the dark, it's her who answers. Not to steal our voice, but to prove we were never alone. The wind picks up slightly, enough to rustle the leaves above you. The sound is soft, but steady. A rhythm. You let it carry you. Let it be enough, because this story doesn't need a conclusion. It's already been told. Retold. Echoed. And now it lives in you. Night has fallen fully now. The stars are bold and unblinking, scattered like salt across a deep navy sky. No clouds. No moon. Just the vast, unanswering cosmos above you, and still, it doesn't feel empty. You walk along a new path now, narrow and well-trodden, likely an old goat trail winding along the side of a shallow ravine. The stones are warm underfoot, still holding on to the heat of the day. Each footfall echoes slightly in the quiet, and for a moment, you realize how often your own sound keeps you company. And you think, this is what echo became. Not just a repetition, but a companion to solitude. The proof that you are here, that you existed, that you mattered enough for your voice to bounce back, even if no one answered. You pause near a bend where the ravine drops off into a bowl-shaped hollow, ringed with small pines. Down in the center, there's a spring, smooth, round, and still as obsidian. It doesn't reflect the stars so much as swallow them, like they're diving into some older, deeper place. And beside it, a cluster of narcissus flowers, still growing, still bending, still gazing. You crouch beside them, brush your fingers along one pale, waxy petal. It trembles slightly, as if remembering. You whisper to the bloom, not expecting a reply. I see you. No echo, but the wind stirs. You sit down at the edge of the pool. Let your thoughts slip into its silence. And you realize, this place feels like an ending, but also a beginning. The myth began with a question: what happens when you love without listening? When you speak without hearing? When you reflect, but never connect? And the answer was, well, this. A flower, a voice, a silence that still listens. Here's your mainstream historical reminder: the myth of Echo and Narcissus was never isolated. It was just one chapter in a vast anthology of Ovid's Metamorphoses, a poem where transformation isn't just magical, it's the only way out. Change, even when tragic, is the final resolution. Narcissus couldn't grow emotionally, so he was changed physically. Echo couldn't speak for herself, so she became the world's reply. That was the logic. That was the spell. But here's the fringe theory: some believe Echo's final transformation wasn't a curse, it was a gift. That maybe Hera's punishment set her free from mortal concerns. That maybe Echo transcended everything. Became something bigger than a girl with a broken heart. Maybe she became the soul of memory itself. Think about it. Every time we quote someone, every time we tell a story someone else told first, every time we say "I remember when," that's Echo, preserving, carrying, repeating, not to annoy, but to honor. You lean back on your elbows, eyes fixed on the stars. A cool breeze brushes over the surface of the spring and ripples the reflection, just slightly. The narcissus flower above it quivers. And suddenly, you think, maybe he can see something more now. Not just himself, but Echo. The sky. The wind. Maybe the reflection isn't the trap anymore. Maybe it's the window. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine what it must have felt like, being Echo, watching someone you love fall for something he couldn't touch. Unable to warn him. Unable to say anything new. Only able to repeat what he already believed. How many times have you been there? How many times have you watched someone cling to their own illusion while you stood in the wings, echoing their truths back to them, hoping they'd finally notice? Too many, but you're still here. And you're still listening, which makes you stronger than the myth. And maybe that's what makes Echo eternal, not her voice, but her patience. Her willingness to be there. Long after the scene has ended, long after the flower has bloomed and faded. You lie down on the grass, head tilted toward the stars. And for the first time, you don't call out, because you don't need to. Echo is already there, everywhere. You stay beneath the stars for a long while, as if the earth has taken your weight into itself and doesn't want to let go. There's something sacred about this quiet. Not because of what it contains, but because of what it allows. Space to think. Space to feel. Space to hear. And Echo fills that space, not loudly, not insistently, but gently. Like a presence that doesn't want to be seen, only understood. Somewhere nearby, an owl lets out a low, deliberate hoot. You wait. Another hoot answers, far off. It's not her. But it's like her. A call and a response. A need and a recognition. That's what Echo always wanted. Not to be worshipped. Not to be adored. Just heard. You sit up slowly, gaze returning to the pond, where the cluster of narcissus blooms still bow over the water. It hasn't changed. Still reflective. Still delicate. Still alone. And yet, not unloved. Because here's the thing that never gets told in the myth: what happens next. Not in the divine sense, or even the poetic one, but in the human one. Eventually, someone finds the flower. They admire it. They touch it. They maybe even pick it. Take it home, place it in a vase. They give it a name. Not Narcissus, because most don't know the myth. Just daffodil. Or paperwhite. Or that pretty white one from the trail. And without realizing it, they honor the boy who looked too long, and the girl who listened too long. The stories carry on, not in verse or myth, but in action. In attention. You step lightly back onto the trail, the way lit only by starlight. There's no torch. No fanfare. No divine signpost to say you've finished something important. Just your own breath. And the sound of your steps. And the echo of those steps, folding gently into the trees. Here's your mainstream fact for the road. Echo and Narcissus weren't only characters, they were ideas, given shape by human longing. The Greeks used them to teach, yes, but also to feel. To wrap their questions in metaphor. What is love without understanding? What is beauty without connection? What is a voice without a listener? Questions we're still asking. Here's one last fringe idea, tucked away in a scholar's dusty commentary. Some say that every time we whisper something vulnerable, something true, and it's received by anyone, person, animal, the wind itself, Echo smiles. Not because she's been remembered, but because you've given her voice new meaning. You reach the top of a gentle ridge now, overlooking the valley where the myth began. It's quiet, but it's full. And here's the softest part of all: you don't need to carry the whole story with you anymore. You've walked it. You've felt it. You've answered the call. And now you can just let it rest. The myths don't disappear when you stop telling them. They sleep. They settle into the land. They curl up like flowers beside still water. And when someone calls out again, tomorrow or next year or 1,000 seasons from now, Echo will answer. Because that's what she does. That's what she is. And somewhere, maybe not far, the flower will still be bending toward the pool. Not in grief. Not in punishment. But simply because it remembers what it once was. What it once meant. Just like you. And now, the journey winds gently to a close. You've walked through a forest shaped by story, stepped beside a stream where longing once bloomed, and listened to voices, some faded, some imagined, some your own, echoing across time. You've stood where Echo waited, knelt where Narcissus fell, and seen how something as simple as a reflection can become a trap, or a gift, or both. Now, the path ahead softens. The trees grow quieter. The stars blur at the edges of your vision, as if they're beginning to drift too. Let them. You don't need to hold on anymore. Not to the myth. Not to the questions. Not even to your own voice. Just breathe. Let each exhale carry away a little of the tension clinging to your shoulders. Let each inhale draw in the hush of night, the slow music of wind moving through leaves. You are safe. You are still. You are not alone, because stories like this aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be felt. To lie with you in the dark, curling around your thoughts like a blanket, warming the cold edges of your wondering. So rest. Let the echo sleep. Let the flower rest its head. And when you wake, may the silence between dreams carry their whispers, not to haunt, but to remind you that even in stillness, something is always listening. Good night.
lan tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó không có rõ đâu, không quay không có rõ. Máy xịn kìa, chứ máy này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho thằng Thịnh.
Quay nó có rõ đâu, không quay không có rõ. Nói xịn kìa chứ nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho thằng Thịnh.
Quay nó có rõ đâu, không quay không có rõ. Má xịn kìa chứ nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho thằng Thịnh.
Quay
chớp chớp nhán nhán được